My name is Isaac, I'm 32 years old. I never thought I'd be telling this story, but life has a way of surprising you. I came home early on our anniversary with a gift for Lauren, my wife. As I walked upstairs, I heard strange noises from our bedroom. When I opened the door, I found Lauren in bed with my brother Dominic. He saw me and smirked triumphantly until I said, "I just sent your wife a video of you two." What Dominic didn't know was that Natalie was already in the hospital about to deliver their baby. Before I tell you this painful story, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal. Trust me, what happened next will show you exactly how deep family betrayal can cut. Dominic and I were never the typical loving brothers. From childhood, everything between us was a competition. Whether it was grades, sports, or our parents' attention, Dominic always needed to win. Being 3 years older, he often had the advantage, but that never stopped him from gloating when he outperformed me. Our parents noticed the rivalry but dismissed it as normal brotherly competition. They never realized how deeply it affected our relationship, or how it would shape our adult interactions. I still remember Christmas when I was 11 and Dominic was 14. I received a mountain bike I'd been begging for all year. Instead of being happy with his own gifts, Dominic spent the following week pointing out how his previous year's bike was better, faster, and more expensive. That pattern repeated throughout our lives, with Dominic needing to diminish my accomplishments to elevate himself. College provided a welcome reprieve from Dominic's constant one-upmanship. I attended State University while he went to a private college across the country. Those years gave me space to develop my own identity without his shadow looming over me. I studied finance, joined clubs, made genuine friends, and eventually met Lauren. Lauren Thompson walked into the campus coffee shop where I worked part-time during my junior year. I noticed her immediately, not just because of her beauty, which was considerable with her warm brown eyes and contagious smile, but because of how she treated everyone around her with authentic kindness. She ordered the same drink 3 times a week, chai latte with almond milk, always thanking me by name after I wrote it on her cup once. After weeks of small talk, I finally gathered the courage to ask her out. Our first date was nothing extraordinary, dinner at a small Italian restaurant near campus, but our connection was immediate and profound. Lauren studied architecture, dreamed of designing sustainable housing, and volunteered teaching art to underprivileged children. Her compassion and creativity complemented my more analytical nature perfectly. We dated through the remainder of college, and I proposed the year after graduation. The wedding was small but beautiful, held in Lauren's parents' backyard garden. Dominic attended with his new girlfriend Natalie, a pediatric nurse he'd met through mutual friends. Throughout the ceremony, I caught Dominic watching Lauren with an odd expression. At the time, I attributed it to surprise that his younger brother had married before him, perhaps even jealousy that I'd found someone as wonderful as Lauren. "She's too good for you," Dominic told me during the reception, disguising the barb as a toast. "Don't mess this up." The guests laughed, but I recognized the familiar sting of his backhanded compliments. Lauren and I built a beautiful life together. We purchased a modest but charming 3-bedroom house in a good neighborhood, planning for the family we hoped to have. I secured a position at a financial consulting firm while Lauren joined an architectural firm specializing in environmentally conscious design. Weekends were spent furnishing our home, exploring local farmers' markets, and planning for our future. For 3 years, everything seemed perfect. Dominic and Natalie married a year after us. Their wedding was larger, more extravagant, typical Dominic, needing to outdo my celebration. Despite our complicated relationship, I stood as his best man, genuinely hoping his marriage would bring him fulfillment and perhaps soften the competitive edge that defined our relationship. For a while, it seemed possible. Natalie's gentle nature appeared to temper Dominic's more aggressive tendencies, and they seemed happy. Then came the announcement of Natalie's pregnancy. While Natalie glowed with maternal joy, I noticed Dominic's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. At the gender reveal party, when the blue confetti indicated a boy, Dominic drank heavily and made odd comments about fatherhood being the ultimate test of manhood. I should have recognized his anxiety for what it was: Dominic facing a life change he couldn't control or compete with. As Natalie's pregnancy progressed, my own life underwent significant change. I received a major promotion at work, leading a team handling our firm's largest clients. The opportunity was too good to refuse, even though it meant longer hours and occasional weekend work. Lauren supported my career advancement, understanding the financial security it would provide for our future family. The increased workload created a gradual distance between Lauren and me. I'd leave before she woke and return after she'd gone to bed. Our conversations became briefer, focusing on logistics rather than connection. Date nights became rare, then non-existent. I noticed Lauren's disappointment but assured myself it was temporary, that once I established myself in the new position, we'd return to our normal routine. During this period, Dominic began visiting our home more frequently. At first, his visits coincided with times I was present: Sunday dinners or the occasional weekend gathering. Then he started offering to help Lauren around the house while I worked. He would fix leaking faucets, assemble furniture, or assist with yard work. I appreciated his apparent thoughtfulness, believing he was finally developing the brotherly relationship I'd always wanted. In retrospect, the signs were there. Lauren mentioned Dominic's name with increasing frequency. New inside jokes emerged between them that excluded me. When the three of us were together, I sometimes caught them exchanging glances I couldn't interpret. Lauren began dressing differently, paying more attention to her appearance even on days she worked from home. She received phone calls that she took in another room, returning with flushed cheeks and vague explanations. I ignored these warning signs, too consumed with work and too trusting of both my wife and brother to imagine the betrayal taking shape under my own roof. The promotion that I thought would secure our future was instead creating the space for its destruction. 6 months passed this way, with me working 12-hour days while Dominic ingratiated himself into my home and my marriage. Had I been more attentive, perhaps I would have recognized what was happening before it culminated in the devastating scene I walked in on that fateful day, our anniversary, the day everything changed. The morning began like any other workday. I arrived at the office by 7, coffee in hand, prepared for another long day of client meetings and financial analysis. My assistant Meredith had organized my schedule efficiently, as always: back-to-back meetings until 4, followed by review of quarterly projections. I settled at my desk, unaware that by afternoon, my personal life would lie in ruins. Around 11, my boss Gregory called me into his office. Gregory was a stern but fair manager who rarely engaged in small talk, so I expected a discussion about the Henderson account we'd been struggling with. "Isaac, how's the quarterly projection looking?" Gregory asked, leaning back in his leather chair. "On track to finish by tomorrow," I replied. "The Henderson numbers are challenging, but we should show solid growth despite the market fluctuations." Gregory nodded approvingly. "Good work. Your team has exceeded expectations since you took over. I know the hours have been brutal." "Nothing I can't handle," I assured him, though in truth, the constant work had been wearing me down. "Well, today you get a break. The Henderson meeting was pushed to next week. You can head out early, get a jump on your weekend." I hesitated, surprised by the unexpected free time. Then I remembered it was my and Lauren's anniversary. 5 years of marriage, and I'd been so consumed with work I'd nearly forgotten. This was perfect timing. "Actually, that's great timing. It's my anniversary today," I explained. Gregory smiled. "Even better reason to leave early. Go surprise your wife." Energized by the opportunity to make up for my recent neglect, I finished critical tasks and left the office by 2. My first stop was the jewelry store where I'd purchased Lauren's engagement ring. I selected a pair of sapphire earrings that matched her eyes, spending more than I'd planned but feeling she deserved something special after months of my absence. The jeweler gift-wrapped the box with a gold ribbon while I selected a card expressing my love and commitment. Next, I stopped at an upscale wine shop for a bottle of champagne, the same brand we'd had at our wedding. On impulse, I added flowers from the florist next door, creating what I hoped would be the perfect anniversary surprise. In my mind, I pictured Lauren's delight, imagined reconnecting over dinner, perhaps rekindling the intimacy that had faded in recent months. As I turned onto our street around 3:30, I immediately noticed Dominic's black SUV parked in our driveway. Initial confusion gave way to mild irritation. Why was my brother at our house in the middle of a workday? Then I rationalized that perhaps Lauren had mentioned our anniversary, and Dominic was dropping off a gift. That would be uncharacteristically thoughtful of him, but maybe Natalie's influence had finally softened his competitive nature. I parked behind his vehicle and gathered my gifts, planning to thank him for stopping by before politely suggesting he leave so Lauren and I could celebrate privately. As I approached the front door, I realized I didn't hear conversation from inside. The house seemed unusually quiet. Using my key, I entered silently, not intentionally sneaking but simply moving quietly out of habit. The downstairs was empty, no sign of Lauren or Dominic. Then I heard faint sounds coming from upstairs. At first, I couldn't identify the noise, but as I moved toward the staircase, recognition dawned with sickening clarity. My body moved on autopilot up the stairs, mind racing but refusing to accept what seemed increasingly obvious. Our bedroom door was partially open. The sounds grew louder, unmistakable now. Still, some part of me hoped for an alternative explanation. Maybe Lauren was watching something on her laptop. Maybe I was jumping to conclusions. I pushed the door open. The gifts fell from my hands. The champagne bottle shattered on the hardwood floor, but I barely registered the sound. There in our bed, the bed we'd purchased together after weeks of debating firmness levels, was my wife entangled with my brother. They were so engrossed they didn't notice me immediately. When they did, their reactions could not have been more different. Lauren's face transformed with horror. She scrambled to cover herself, eyes wide with panic and shame. "Isaac! Oh God, Isaac, I can explain!" Dominic's reaction haunts me still. He didn't rush to cover himself or leave the bed. Instead, he looked directly at me with a smirk that communicated everything about our lifelong rivalry. This wasn't just an affair, it was conquest. He had taken what was mine, and he wanted me to know it. "Little brother," he said, voice dripping with condescension, "you're home early." In that moment, something inside me shifted. The shock and heartbreak were there, certainly, but overriding everything was a cold clarity I'd never experienced before. Without conscious thought, I reached for my phone in my pocket, held it up, and took several photos in quick succession. "What are you doing?" Lauren shrieked. I didn't answer her. Instead, I pressed record and captured 30 seconds of video, enough to document their betrayal beyond any possibility of denial. Dominic's expression changed from smugness to confusion as he watched me. "Deleting that won't help you," I said quietly, stopping the recording. "I just sent your wife a video of you too." It wasn't entirely true, I hadn't sent it yet, but the bluff achieved its purpose. Dominic's triumphant expression vanished, replaced by genuine fear. "You're lying," he said, but the uncertainty in his voice betrayed him. With deliberate movements, I opened my messaging app, selected Natalie's contact, attached the video, and added a simple message. "I'm sorry to send this now. You deserve to know." I turned the phone screen toward them so they could watch as I hit send. Dominic lunged from the bed, naked and frantic. "You fucking idiot! Natalie's in the hospital. She's in labor right now." That information should have given me pause, might have made a better man hesitate. But in that moment, I felt nothing but grim satisfaction. "Then I guess you'll have something to think about during delivery." Dominic grabbed his scattered clothes, cursing as he dressed haphazardly. "I'm going to destroy you for this," he threatened, pushing past me to the door. "You already tried," I replied, stepping aside. After Dominic stormed out, the bedroom fell into terrible silence. Lauren remained in our bed, sheet clutched to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "Isaac, please," she began. "It's not what you think. I was lonely, you were never home." I raised my hand to silence her. "Save it." I don't want to hear how this is somehow my fault. Where are you going? She asked as I turned to leave. Anywhere but here, I answered, not looking back. I walked downstairs, careful to avoid the broken glass and spilled champagne. The flowers lay crushed where I dropped them, the jewelry box somehow undamaged. I picked it up and pocketed it, not for Lauren, never for Lauren again, but because returning it seemed too complicated to contemplate in that moment. As I got in my car, I heard Lauren calling my name from the doorway. I didn't look back as I drove away, no destination in mind, just the desperate need to put distance between myself and the devastating scene I'd witnessed. The life I'd built, the future I planned, the people I trusted, all destroyed in a single afternoon. I drove aimlessly for hours, the scene replaying in my mind like a horror film on loop. Eventually, I found myself outside my friend Travis's apartment building. Travis and I had been close since college, though we'd seen less of each other since my promotion. He was the only person I could think of who might provide sanctuary without immediate judgment. When Travis opened his door, one look at my face told him something was catastrophically wrong. "Isaac? What happened, man? You look like death." Words failed me completely. I stood in his doorway, mouth opening and closing, unable to articulate the betrayal. When he pulled me inside and put a beer in my hand, the dam broke. I told him everything between ragged breaths and swallowed sobs. Travis listened without interruption, his expression darkening as I recounted finding Lauren and Dominic together, the triumphant smirk on my brother's face, my impulsive decision to send the evidence to Natalie. "Jesus Christ," Travis said when I finished. "Your own brother? There are no words, man. I don't know what to do," I admitted, the adrenaline fading, leaving me hollow. "I can't go home." "You're staying here," Travis said firmly. "Guest room is yours as long as you need it." My phone had been buzzing continuously in my pocket. I finally checked it to find 17 missed calls from Lauren, 5 from Dominic, and numerous text messages I couldn't bear to read. As I stared at the screen, a notification appeared from an unknown number. With trembling fingers, I opened it. "Isaac, it's Natalie. I received your message. Currently in labor. We'll talk later." The stark simplicity of her response hit me with fresh guilt. In my moment of vengeful impulse, I'd potentially compromised the birth of my nephew. Yet I couldn't bring myself to regret exposing the truth, only the timing of it. "Natalie got the video," I told Travis. "She's in labor right now." Travis winced. "Bad timing, but she deserved to know. Dominic's the villain here, not you." I wasn't so sure. The image of Natalie, pregnant and vulnerable, receiving that video while preparing to bring new life into the world would haunt me for years to come. That evening, as Travis and I picked up takeout neither of us had appetite for, pounding on the door startled us both. I knew before Travis looked through the peephole that it would be Lauren. "It's your call," Travis said. "I can tell her to leave." Part of me wanted exactly that, to hide from the confrontation, to never see her face again. But the larger part needed answers, needed to hear whatever justification she believed could explain her betrayal. "Let her in," I said, steeling myself. Lauren burst through the door, her face streaked with tears, hair disheveled. She looked nothing like the composed, confident woman I'd married. "Isaac, thank God. We need to talk." "So talk," I replied, remaining seated, maintaining physical distance between us. "It wasn't planned," she began, voice quavering. "You have to believe me. It just happened. You were gone all the time, working those endless hours. I was lonely and Dominic was there." "Dominic was there," I repeated flatly. "My brother was there, in our home, because I trusted you both. And your solution to loneliness was to sleep with him in our bed?" "It wasn't like that," Lauren insisted. "It started innocently. He would help around the house, listen when I talked about missing you. Then one day he kissed me, and I should have stopped it. I know I should have, but you didn't," I finished for her. "For how long, Lauren? How long has this been going on?" Her hesitation told me everything. 3 months, she finally admitted. 3 months. While I worked late nights to secure our financial future, my wife and brother had been betraying me for 3 months. Every weekend Dominic had helped around the house. Every time Lauren had been too tired for intimacy, every family dinner where they'd shared those private glances, all part of their deception. I want to fix this, Lauren pleaded, moving toward me. We can go to counseling. I'll do whatever it takes. I made a terrible mistake, but I love you, Isaac. Our marriage is worth fighting for. The words that should have moved me left me cold. There's nothing to fix, I said. You didn't make a mistake. You made thousands of decisions, every day for 3 months, to betray me with my own brother. Please, she sobbed, reaching for my hand. Please don't throw away 5 years of marriage. I pulled away from her touch. I didn't throw it away. You did. Travis, who had been silently witnessing our exchange, stepped forward when Lauren became more agitated, approaching me with increasing desperation. I think you should leave now, he told her firmly. Isaac needs space. This isn't your business, Lauren snapped at him before turning back to me. Isaac, please come home. We can talk properly there. I'm not going anywhere with you, I stated definitively. We're done, Lauren. I'll contact you about divorce proceedings. The word divorce hit her like a physical blow. She staggered back, fresh tears springing to her eyes. You don't mean that. You're angry now, but you can't mean that. I've never meant anything more in my life. Travis escorted her to the door despite her continued protests. Before leaving, she turned back one last time. Your parents called. They think you overreacted by sending that video to Natalie. They said we all need to talk as a family. Of course they did. My parents had always minimized Dominic's behavior, always expected me to be the reasonable one who compromised. Even now, they were more concerned with family appearances than the destruction of my marriage. Tell them I said they're welcome to have Dominic and you as family. I'm done. After Lauren left, I checked social media on impulse and immediately regretted it. Word traveled fast. Dominic had apparently created a scene at the hospital, with security removing him after Natalie showed the medical staff my video. He'd posted a vague but threatening message clearly directed at me. Family betrays family, consequences follow. That night, lying in Travis's guest room, sleep eluded me entirely. I stared at the unfamiliar ceiling, reviewing every moment of my relationship with Lauren, searching for signs I might have missed, wondering if anything had ever been real between us. By morning, my grief had crystallized into something harder, colder. I called work and requested emergency personal leave, then turned off my phone entirely. When I finally turned it back on the next day, I had voicemails from Lauren's parents expressing their disappointment in how I'd handled the situation. The audacity stunned me. Their daughter had been caught in bed with my brother, yet somehow I was the villain for exposing the truth. I deleted the messages without response, then contacted my boss to explain I needed additional time off. Gregory, to his credit, was understanding, offering the company's legal assistance if needed for divorce proceedings. Take the time you need, he said. Your job will be waiting. It was the only certainty I had left in a life suddenly unrecognizable. A week after discovering Lauren's betrayal, I remained at Travis's apartment, emerging from the initial shock into a deeper, more pervasive anger. The practical aspects of my situation could no longer be ignored, so I scheduled a meeting with Eleanor Pearson, a divorce attorney recommended by a colleague. Eleanor's office projected exactly the confidence I needed: organized, professional, devoid of unnecessary sentiment. The attorney herself matched her surroundings, direct, efficient, and refreshingly straightforward. Based on what you've told me, Mr. Parker, you have grounds for an at-fault divorce citing adultery, Eleanor explained. The evidence you collected, while obtained in an emotionally charged moment, is admissible. However, I should warn you that using it in court makes it public record. I understand, I replied. What's our first step? Financial separation is crucial. Have you checked your accounts recently? I hadn't, avoiding that particular reality. When I logged into our joint account from Eleanor's office computer, the news shock hit hard. Our savings account, which had contained nearly $30,000, showed a balance of $42.13. Lauren had withdrawn everything 3 days after I left. "This is actually helpful to our case," Eleanor noted, documenting the transaction history. "It demonstrates financial misconduct. We'll file for an emergency hearing regarding marital assets." I left Eleanor's office with a folder of paperwork and the unwelcome task of returning to the house to retrieve essential belongings. Travis offered to accompany me for support, and though I didn't say it, protection should Dominic be there. The house looked exactly as I'd left it, except for the cleaned-up champagne spill in the upstairs hallway. Lauren wasn't home, allowing me to gather clothes, important documents, and personal items without confrontation. In the home office, I discovered evidence that deepened my understanding of the affair's premeditation. Hotel receipts dating back 4 months, not 3 as Lauren had claimed, along with a Valentine's card from Dominic with explicitly romantic language. "They've been planning weekend getaways," I told Travis, showing him the receipts. "All those professional conferences Lauren attended while I worked weekends." "Don't torture yourself, man," Travis advised, taking the papers from my hand. "We've got what you need. Let's go." As we loaded my belongings into Travis's car, our neighbor Sophia approached cautiously from across the street. "Isaac, I've been worried about you," she said. "I'm so sorry about what happened." "You knew?" I asked, suddenly wondering who else had been aware while I remained oblivious. "No, not until after," Sophia clarified quickly. "But I did notice his car here often when you were at work. I thought it was nice that your brother visited Lauren to keep her company. If I had any idea..." Her words trailed off, but the implication was clear. The affair had been conducted so openly that neighbors had noticed Dominic's presence, yet no one suspected anything untoward because he was my brother. The realization made me physically nauseous. That evening, fate delivered a confrontation I wasn't prepared for. Travis and I were at the Anchor, a local bar we frequented in college, when Dominic walked in. He spotted me immediately, his expression shifting from surprise to anger. Against Travis's advice, I didn't leave. Dominic approached our table, alcohol already evident in his unsteady gait. "Proud of yourself?" he slurred. "Natalie's left me. Took the baby to her mother's." "That's between you and Natalie," I replied evenly. "Maybe don't sleep with your brother's wife next time." "You self-righteous prick," Dominic spat. "You neglected her for months. What did you expect would happen?" His attempt to justify the betrayal ignited my carefully controlled anger. I stood, fists clenched. "I expected my brother and my wife to respect our marriage, not conspire behind my back." Dominic shoved me hard, sending me back against the table. "You've always had everything handed to you. Perfect Isaac with his perfect life. You didn't deserve her." Travis intervened before I could retaliate, positioning himself between us. "That's enough. Walk away, Dominic." For a tense moment, I thought Dominic might take a swing at Travis. Instead, he pointed a finger at me. "This isn't over. You've destroyed my marriage, my relationship with my son. I won't forget that. You destroyed those things yourself," I countered as he stormed out. Travis guided me back to my seat, signaling the bartender for another round. "You know he would have pressed charges if you'd hit him. Not worth it." He was right, of course. Revenge might feel momentarily satisfying but would ultimately complicate my already precarious situation. The realization that I'd been prepared to physically fight my own brother was sobering. Despite everything, violence wasn't who I was or who I wanted to become. The following week, I began sessions with Dr. Miranda Chin, a therapist specializing in trauma and betrayal. Our first meeting was awkward. I'd never considered therapy before and resisted the vulnerability it required. "What do you hope to achieve through our sessions, Isaac?" Dr. Chin asked after I recounted my situation. "I want to stop feeling this way," I answered honestly. Angry all the time. Replaying everything in my head. Wondering what I did wrong. You believe you did something wrong? The question caught me off guard. I worked too much. Wasn't home enough. Lauren said she was lonely? Dr. Chen's expression remained neutral. Do you believe those circumstances justify her actions? No, I said firmly. Yet you're taking some responsibility for her choices. This simple observation initiated my first real insight. Through subsequent sessions, Dr. Chen helped me identify patterns in my relationships, my lifelong competition with Dominic, my tendency to overwork to prove my worth, my willingness to accept Lauren's increasing emotional distance rather than confront potential problems. Your work ethic isn't a character flaw, Dr. Chen noted during our third session. But using work to avoid emotional intimacy might be a pattern worth examining. These insights didn't excuse Lauren and Dominic's betrayal but helped me understand the dysfunctional dynamics that created fertile ground for it. I began recognizing that while I couldn't control others' actions, I could choose my response to them. Meanwhile, practical life continued its demands. I learned through mutual friends that Natalie had officially filed for divorce from Dominic and was raising their newborn son alone. The knowledge brought me no satisfaction, only sadness for an innocent child born into such chaos. My own divorce proceedings moved forward with Eleanor's efficient guidance. Lauren contested the at-fault filing, claiming my emotional abandonment had driven her to seek comfort elsewhere. Her attempts to shift blame only strengthened my resolve. After a month at Travis's apartment, I recognized I needed to establish my own space. Gregory had been understanding about my leave of absence but expected me back soon. I needed to rebuild a life independent of both Lauren and the toxic dynamic with Dominic. I think I'm ready to return to work, I told Gregory during a lunch meeting. At least part-time initially. Gregory nodded approvingly. The team will be glad to have you back. We've managed, but your expertise has been missed. Returning to work provided welcome structure, though colleagues' awkward sympathy made clear that my personal drama wasn't as private as I'd hoped. Still, immersing myself in familiar professional challenges offered respite from constantly processing my personal situation. The true epiphany came unexpectedly during a routine therapy session with Dr. Chen. We were discussing my relationship with Dominic when she asked a question that stopped me cold. What would healing look like for you, Isaac? Not legally or practically, but emotionally. I realized I'd been so focused on surviving the immediate crisis that I hadn't considered what recovery might actually entail. Did I want reconciliation with Lauren? No, that bridge was thoroughly burned. With Dominic? Possibly, but not from a place of submission or forgetting. With myself? Absolutely, but I wasn't sure what that path looked like. I think, I said slowly, healing would mean I no longer define myself by what happened to me. That I can think about Lauren and Dominic without this rage consuming me. That I can trust again someday. Dr. Chen smiled slightly. That's a powerful realization, Isaac. And an achievable goal, though not an easy one. For the first time since discovering the affair, I felt something resembling hope, not for reconciliation or even justice, but for eventually finding peace. The betrayal would always be part of my story, but perhaps not the defining chapter I'd assumed it must be. That evening, I called Gregory and accepted the leadership position on a new project he'd offered earlier that week, a commitment to moving forward rather than remaining suspended in the aftermath of betrayal. The rebuilding had begun. 3 months after the day my marriage effectively ended, I moved into a one-bedroom apartment in a modern building across town. The space was nothing like the house Lauren and I had shared, minimalist, urban, with none of the carefully selected furnishings we'd accumulated together. The fresh start was exactly what I needed. Establishing new routines proved therapeutic. I woke early for a morning run before work, something I'd always claimed I didn't have time for previously. Weekends became opportunities for activities I'd neglected, reading novels instead of financial reports, trying new restaurants alone or with Travis, occasionally attending community events posted on the building's bulletin board. My sessions with Dr. Miranda continued, transitioning from crisis management to deeper personal growth. Through her guidance, I began dismantling unhealthy patterns that had shaped my relationships long before Lauren's betrayal. You mentioned your parents always expected you to be the reasonable one with Dominic, Dr. Miranda noted during one session. How did that impact your sense of fairness in relationships? The question unlocked a realization that I'd consistently prioritized others' needs above my own, seeking approval through accommodation rather than authentic connection. This pattern had manifested in my marriage, working longer hours for financial security while neglecting emotional intimacy, accepting Lauren's increasing distance rather than addressing it directly. I confused self-sacrifice with love, I acknowledged, and created relationships where my needs were secondary. Dr. Miranda nodded. That awareness gives you power to create different dynamics moving forward. Implementing this awareness meant establishing boundaries I'd previously neglected. I declined a major project at work that would have required excessive overtime, explaining to Gregory that while I remained committed to the firm, I was prioritizing work-life balance. To my surprise, he respected this decision, even mentioning that my previous workaholic tendencies had concerned him. Burnout employees make costly mistakes, Gregory observed. This new approach makes you more valuable, not less. I reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage, particularly those Lauren had subtly discouraged me from maintaining relationships with. Carlos and Jennifer, a couple I'd been close with in college, invited me to dinner at their home, offering companionship without the pressure of discussing my divorce unless I wanted to. We miss you, man, Carlos said simply. Glad to have you back. These renewed connections revealed how isolated I'd become in my marriage, another insight to process in therapy. Lauren had gradually separated me from my support system, whether intentionally or unconsciously, creating a dynamic where I relied primarily on her for emotional connection. My physical health became another focus of transformation. I joined a boxing gym, channeling residual anger into productive physical activity rather than destructive rumination. The discipline required by the sport provided both emotional release and newfound confidence in my physical capabilities. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings continued their bureaucratic crawl. Lauren made several attempts at reconciliation, each more desperate than the last. She sent lengthy emails detailing her regrets, left tearful voicemails pledging change, even appeared unannounced at my workplace once, requiring security intervention. I maintained the boundaries Eleanor had advised: communication only through attorneys, no private meetings, documentation of all contact attempts. Despite Lauren's persistence, my resolve never wavered. The marriage was irreparably broken, not just by the affair but by the fundamental breach of trust it represented. Lauren eventually moved in with her friend Bethany after listing our house for sale, as the court had ordered liquidation of major shared assets. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned she was struggling financially, having lost her position at the architectural firm following an emotional breakdown. While I took no pleasure in her difficulties, neither did I feel responsible for them. Her circumstances were the natural consequences of her choices, not my obligation to remedy. Dominic's presence in my life diminished to occasional threatening messages that Eleanor documented for potential restraining order purposes. He blamed me entirely for the collapse of his marriage, refusing to acknowledge his own agency in the affair. Natalie, by contrast, maintained dignified silence, focusing on caring for their son while proceeding with divorce. Then came an unexpected encounter that shifted something fundamental in my healing process. While getting coffee at a shop near my new apartment, I literally bumped into Natalie, who was carrying her infant son in a front-facing carrier. "Isaac," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "I'm sorry I didn't see you." "Entirely my fault," I assured her, awkwardly aware of our strange connection. "How are you?" The conversation that followed in a quiet corner of the coffee shop was initially stilted but gradually eased into something approaching comfortable. Natalie didn't avoid the obvious topic between us but addressed it with remarkable grace. "I wanted to thank you," she said after we'd exchanged pleasantries. "Not for how you told me, but that you told me at all. I needed to know the truth. I'm sorry about the timing. I offered sincerely. I wasn't thinking clearly. Natalie shrugged slightly. Maybe there's never a good time to learn your husband is cheating with his brother's wife. At least I had excellent medical support when I got the news. Her dry humor surprised a laugh from me. That's one way to look at it. She introduced me to her son Oliver, a peaceful infant with Dominic's eyes but, thankfully, none of his expression. Holding him briefly was a complex emotional experience. This innocent child was my nephew, connected to me by blood despite the circumstances of his birth. He's beautiful, I told Natalie honestly. He's the good that came from all this, she replied. I can't regret anything that brought him to me. Her perspective was illuminating, finding value amid devastating circumstances without denying their painful reality. As we parted ways, Natalie suggested we might stay in occasional contact, an offer I appreciated but wasn't sure I was ready to accept. The encounter prompted a thoughtful discussion in my next therapy session. She's moved forward without forgetting, I told Dr. Miranda. Found purpose without pretending the betrayal didn't matter. Is that approach appealing to you? Dr. Miranda asked. Yes, I admitted. But I'm not sure how to get there. Perhaps you've already begun, she suggested. You're building a new life while processing the old one. That's the essence of healthy integration. Encouraged by this perspective, I took another significant step in my recovery. A colleague had been suggesting for weeks that I meet her friend Madison, a literature professor who had also experienced a difficult divorce. I'd declined previously, not feeling ready for even casual dating. Now, I accepted the introduction. Madison and I met for dinner at a small Italian restaurant. She was intelligent, witty, and refreshingly direct about her own past. Divorced 2 years, she shared early in our conversation. He left for a graduate student. Cliché, I know, but it felt original at the time. Her ability to acknowledge pain while refusing to be defined by it resonated deeply. We didn't share dramatic personal stories all evening but discovered mutual interests in historical fiction, hiking, and terrible science fiction movies. When we parted, I felt a cautious optimism I hadn't experienced in months, not necessarily about Madison specifically, but about the possibility of genuine connection after betrayal. I'd like to do this again, I told her honestly. I was hoping you'd say that, she replied with a warm smile. The date marked a turning point. I wasn't ready for a serious relationship, but I was ready to consider the possibility of one someday. The future I'd imagined with Lauren was gone forever, but perhaps a different, equally meaningful future awaited discovery. As 6 months approached since the day of discovery, I recognized how profoundly I had changed. The immediate pain had transformed into something more complex. Not gone, but integrated into a larger narrative of growth. I was no longer merely surviving betrayal, but actively creating a life worth living despite it. 6 months to the day after discovering Lauren and Dominic's betrayal, I stood in a county courthouse for the final divorce hearing. The proceedings had been expedited due to the adultery evidence and Lauren's eventual decision to stop contesting the at-fault filing. Eleanor sat beside me at the plaintiff's table, her organized documentation a stark contrast to the emotional disorder that had necessitated it. Lauren entered with her attorney, a young man who seemed uncomfortable with the case. She looked different, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes, her usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. Our eyes met briefly before she looked away. I felt nothing but a distant sadness for what might have been, all romantic attachment thoroughly extinguished. The judge reviewed our settlement agreement, which divided our assets equitably despite Lauren's earlier attempt to drain our accounts. The house sale proceeds would be split equally, retirement accounts divided per the prenuptial agreement I'd insisted upon before our marriage. Lauren would keep her car and personal possessions, I would keep mine, and we would have no further financial obligations to each other. Are both parties satisfied with these terms? The judge asked. Yes, Your Honor. Eleanor and Lauren's attorney confirmed simultaneously. Then by the power vested in me by the state, I hereby dissolve this marriage. The divorce is granted. The gavel struck with surprising softness, the sound nonetheless final. As we gathered our belongings, Lauren approached hesitantly. Eleanor gave me a questioning look, but I nodded to indicate I could handle the interaction. Isaac, Lauren began, voice barely above a whisper. I know it doesn't change anything, but I am truly sorry. What I did to you was unforgivable. Her acknowledgement without justification was unexpected. For months she had minimized, deflected, and blamed, but now she simply accepted responsibility. Perhaps her own therapy had yielded insights, or maybe the reality of our divorce finalization had broken through her denial. Thank you for saying that, I replied evenly. I hope you find peace, Lauren. You too, she said, eyes welling with tears. She quickly blinked away. You deserve better than what I gave you. We parted without dramatic declarations or renewed hostility, just two people acknowledging the end of a shared chapter before continuing on separate paths. The exchange provided a closure I hadn't realized I needed. Outside the courthouse, Eleanor congratulated me on maintaining composure. Many clients can't resist a parting shot, she observed. Your restraint speaks well of you. Anger serves no purpose anymore, I explained. I'm ready to move forward. That evening, I met Travis for dinner, marking the official end of my marriage with quiet reflection rather than celebration or mourning. Travis had been my steadfast support throughout the ordeal, offering his home when I had nowhere else to go, listening without judgment during my darkest moments. To new beginnings, Travis proposed as a toast. And to true friends, I added, genuinely grateful for his presence in my life. The following week brought an unexpected message: Dominic requesting to meet. My initial instinct was refusal, but after discussing it with Dr. Miranda, I recognized the potential value in confronting this unresolved relationship. What do you hope might come from such a meeting? Dr. Miranda asked during our session. Honestly? I'm not sure, I admitted. Closure, maybe. Or at least a chance to say things I've needed to say. Then perhaps it's worth considering, she suggested, with appropriate boundaries in place. I agreed to meet Dominic at a restaurant downtown, choosing a public location to discourage extreme behavior. When I arrived, he was already seated, looking significantly older than when I'd last seen him. The confident swagger that had defined his personality was noticeably absent. Thank you for coming, he said as I sat across from him. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't, I replied honestly. What did you want to discuss? Dominic seemed taken aback by my directness. I thought we should talk. About everything. You mean about how you slept with my wife for months? How you came into my home under the guise of brotherly support while betraying me? That everything? He flinched visibly. I know I can't fix what happened. But we're brothers, Isaac. That has to count for something. Why? I challenged. Because we share DNA? You've spent your entire life competing with me, diminishing my achievements, and ultimately betraying me in the most profound way possible. What exactly about that brotherhood should I value? My candor seemed to stun him into momentary silence. When he responded, his voice had lost its defensive edge. I've been in therapy, he said quietly, trying to understand why I did it. Why I've always needed to take what's yours. And what brilliant insight have you gained? I couldn't keep the sarcasm from my tone. That I've always been jealous of you, Dominic admitted, staring into his untouched drink. You make everything look easy: school, career, relationships. People genuinely like you. I've always had to try so hard, and still. So you slept with my wife too? What, even the score? Dominic shook his head. It wasn't that calculated. At least, not consciously. Lauren was complaining about you working too much, and I saw an opportunity to be the hero. To be chosen over you for once? His explanation wasn't particularly insightful or original, but the vulnerability with which he offered it was new. The brother I knew would never have admitted jealousy or insecurity. What do you want from me, Dominic? Forgiveness? Understanding? I don't expect forgiveness, he replied. I don't deserve it. But maybe maybe we don't have to be enemies. I considered his words carefully. I don't hate you, I finally said. That requires an emotional investment I'm no longer willing to make. But I don't trust you either, and I'm not sure I ever can again. Dominic nodded slowly. That's fair. More than fair. We parted without dramatic reconciliation or complete rejection, just a tentative acknowledgement that while our relationship would never be what it might have been, perhaps it needn't be defined solely by antagonism. Whether this represented growth or merely exhaustion remained to be seen. The following weekend brought another significant encounter. Natalie had contacted me, asking if I would be willing to meet Oliver properly. Despite my hesitation about maintaining connections to Dominic's family, I agreed, recognizing that my nephew was innocent of his father's transgressions. We met at a small park near Natalie's new apartment. Oliver, now 6 months old, was alert and curious, studying me with solemn concentration before breaking into an unexpected smile. He doesn't smile for everyone, Natalie noted, seeming pleased by her son's reaction to me. Holding Oliver, watching his tiny fingers grasp mine with surprising strength, I felt a complicated surge of emotion. This child was my blood relation, a connection that transcended the broken relationships of his parents. Whatever my feelings toward Dominic, I couldn't transfer them to this innocent child. I'd like to be part of his life, I told Natalie. If you're comfortable with that. I think that would be good for him, she replied. Having family who care about him. As we walked through the park, Natalie shared her own journey of healing, the therapy sessions, single mother support group, and gradual rebuilding of confidence. Like me, she had emerged from betrayal not unscathed but fundamentally intact, perhaps even stronger in certain ways. It's strange, she reflected. A year ago, I thought I knew exactly what my life would look like. Now everything's different, but not necessarily worse. Just different. Her perspective resonated deeply with my own experience. The future I'd planned had been irreparably altered, yet the one unfolding before me held its own potential for fulfillment and meaning. Professionally, my new approach to work-life balance had paradoxically improved my performance. The Henderson project I'd returned to after my leave of absence had exceeded expectations, earning recognition from senior management. Gregory called me into his office to discuss the outcome. The client specifically mentioned your leadership, he informed me. They've requested you for their next phase as well. I'm interested, I confirmed. Provided the schedule accommodates reasonable hours. Gregory smiled. Understood. You know, your work has actually improved since you started leaving the office at normal hours. There's a lesson there. Balance creates better results, I agreed. Something I had to learn the hard way. As my final therapy session with Dr. Miranda approached, we reflected on the journey from crisis to recovery. While I would continue occasional check-ins, we both recognized I had reached a natural conclusion to intensive treatment. When you first came to me, Dr. Miranda observed, you wanted to stop feeling angry and betrayed. How would you describe your emotional state now? I considered the question carefully. I still have moments of anger or sadness, but they're not controlling me anymore. Mostly, I feel forward-looking. The betrayal is part of my story, but it's not the whole story. That's the definition of successful integration, she confirmed. Not absence of pain, but its incorporation into a larger narrative of growth. Her words crystallized my understanding of the past month's journey. I hadn't escaped the pain of betrayal but had learned to carry it differently, not as a defining wound but as one experience among many that had shaped but not limited me. As we concluded our final regular session, Dr. Miranda offered a parting observation. The most significant change I've observed isn't how you view Lauren or Dominic, but how you view yourself. You've reclaimed your sense of worth independent of others' actions or opinions. It was true. The most profound healing hadn't come from confronting those who betrayed me, but from confronting the patterns and beliefs within myself that had contributed to my vulnerability. The betrayal had been entirely Lauren and Dominic's choice, but my response to it had been entirely mine. Shortly after this session, I received a letter from Lauren, not an email or text, but an actual handwritten letter delivered to my apartment. The gesture itself reflected thought and effort, a marked contrast to her earlier impulsive communication attempts. The letter contained no pleas for reconciliation or attempts at justification. Instead, it offered a genuine apology acknowledging the pain she had caused, expressed gratitude for the good years we had shared, and wished me well in building a future without her. She mentioned her own therapy journey and developing understanding of the patterns that had led to her betrayal. "I will always regret losing you," she wrote in closing. "But I am trying to honor what we had by becoming someone worthy of the love you once gave me, even though that love is now rightfully directed elsewhere." I folded the letter carefully after reading it, feeling neither renewed attachment nor bitter anger, just quiet acceptance that this chapter was truly closed. Lauren and I had loved each other once, genuinely if imperfectly. That reality wasn't negated by how our marriage ended, though it could never be reclaimed either. The letter arrived exactly 7 months after the day of discovery, 7 months of grief, anger, therapy, rebuilding, and gradual healing. In that time, I had lost a wife and the brother I thought I had, but gained something perhaps more valuable, an authentic relationship with myself and a life built on conscious choice rather than inherited expectation. 1 year after walking into my bedroom to find my wife and brother together, I stood in my apartment preparing for a dinner I would have once thought impossible. Madison, now my girlfriend of 5 months, was setting the table while I finished cooking. We were expecting guests: Travis and his new girlfriend Aubrey, Carlos and Jennifer, and most surprisingly, Natalie with 15-month-old Oliver. "Are you nervous?" Madison asked, noting my meticulous attention to the roast I was preparing. "A little," I admitted. "It's the first time everyone's meeting together." Madison smiled, understanding the significance. "It's a good thing, bringing all these parts of your life together. Integration, right? Isn't that what Dr. Miranda called it?" Her reference to my therapy terminology made me smile. Madison had never pushed for details about my previous marriage, but listened attentively when I chose to share. Her own experience with betrayal had given her unusual insight, allowing us to connect through shared understanding without being defined by our respective pasts. The dinner proved more relaxed than anticipated. Oliver, now walking with adorable unsteadiness, became the center of attention, charming everyone with his curious nature and ready smile. Watching him interact with Madison, who had a natural way with children, I felt a complex warmth, sadness for what might have been with Lauren mixed with appreciation for what was actually unfolding in my life. Later that evening, after our guests had departed and Madison had gone home, we were taking things slowly. By mutual agreement, I received a text message notification. The final paperwork releasing the proceeds from the house sale had been processed. This last financial tie to my marriage with Lauren was officially concluded, the funds deposited into my account. I sat on my balcony, reflecting on the year's journey. The financial settlement felt anticlimactic, just administrative closure on a chapter emotionally resolved months earlier. Still, it prompted contemplation of how thoroughly my life had transformed. The day after discovering the affair, I couldn't imagine ever feeling normal again. Pain, rage, and betrayal had consumed every waking moment, coloring every interaction and decision. Yet gradually, almost imperceptibly, a new normal had emerged, not a return to life before betrayal, but the creation of something different, and, in some ways, more authentic. My relationship with Dominic remained complicated. We communicated occasionally, primarily regarding family matters, maintaining civil if distant interaction. During the previous month's family gathering at our parents' home, we had managed conversation without hostility, focusing on neutral topics and shared concerns about our father's recent health scare. Neither of us pretended our relationship would ever reclaim the uncomplicated brotherhood of childhood, but we had found a way to exist in each other's orbits without mutual destruction. More surprising was the development of my relationship with Natalie and Oliver. What began as awkward obligation to my nephew had evolved into genuine affection and regular involvement in his life. Natalie had proven remarkably resilient, creating a stable, loving environment for Oliver while pursuing a nursing supervisor position at the hospital. Her strength in adversity had earned my profound respect, and our shared experience of betrayal had fostered unusual understanding between us. A few weeks earlier, Natalie had mentioned that Dominic and Lauren had briefly dated after both divorces were finalized. The relationship lasted barely 2 months before dissolving amid what Natalie described as dramatic recriminations on both sides. "Does that information bother you?" Dr. Miranda had asked during a check-in session. "Honestly? Not really," I replied, somewhat surprised by my own indifference. "It feels like news about strangers." This response had confirmed what I already sensed: my emotional attachment to both Lauren and the betrayal had finally released its grip. The information was merely data, not a trigger for renewed pain or anger. Professionally, my altered approach to work continued yielding positive results. The boundaries I established around working hours initially concerned Gregory, but ultimately impressed him enough to offer me directorship of our division's new sustainability initiative. The role represented significant advancement without requiring sacrifice of personal life, a balance I once believed impossible. "You've become one of our most effective team leaders," Gregory noted during my performance review. "People want to work with you because you model sustainable excellence rather than burnout." My social circle had expanded beyond work colleagues and old friends to include a diverse community. I joined a recreational basketball league, volunteered monthly at a financial literacy program for underserved youth, and participated in Madison's book club despite being the only male member, a source of good-natured teasing I happily accepted. These connections provided something I hadn't fully appreciated during my marriage: a multifaceted support system rather than emotional dependence on a single relationship. When Madison and I occasionally disagreed or needed space, I had other meaningful connections to turn to, creating healthier interdependence rather than the isolation that had characterized my relationship with Lauren. My final follow-up session with Dr. Miranda had occurred the previous week, marking the official conclusion of therapy. We had reflected on the journey from crisis intervention to personal growth, identifying the tools and insights that would support continued well-being. "What would you tell someone just beginning this journey?" Dr. Miranda had asked. "Someone who just discovered a significant betrayal?" After consideration, I replied, "I tell them that what feels unsurvivable now will eventually become just one part of their story. That healing isn't about forgetting or even necessarily forgiving, but about reclaiming the authority to define your own life." Dr. Miranda smiled. I couldn't have said it better myself. As I sat on my balcony that evening, contemplating the year's transformation, my phone chimed with a message from Madison. "Dinner was wonderful. Your friends are lovely. Oliver is adorable. But mostly, I just wanted to say I'm proud of you. Building this new life took courage." Her words captured what I had gradually come to understand. That surviving betrayal wasn't merely about enduring pain but about actively choosing to create meaning despite it. The life I now lived wasn't a consolation prize for what I had lost but a genuine achievement built through conscious choice and persistent effort. The betrayal would always remain part of my history, a significant chapter in my personal narrative. But it was no longer the story's defining plot point, merely one event among many that had shaped my journey without determining its destination. The following morning, I opened my laptop to find an email notification from a real estate listing service. Lauren had finally sold her condo, purchased with her portion of our house proceeds, and was relocating to another state for a fresh start. The information registered without emotional charge, just another indication of life continuing its forward movement for all involved. As I prepared for a weekend hiking trip with Madison and friends from my basketball league, I reflected on the strange gratitude I now felt for the painful journey of the past year. Not gratitude for the betrayal itself that remained an unnecessary wound, but for the growth it had ultimately catalyzed. I had lost a marriage but found authentic self-knowledge. Lost a brother as I knew him but gained a meaningful relationship with my nephew. Lost naive trust but gained discerning vulnerability. The exchange wasn't one I would have chosen, but having survived it, I recognized its unexpected value. What happened with Lauren and Dominic that day a year ago broke something I had believed unbreakable. But in the breaking, I had discovered the capacity to rebuild something stronger, more authentic, and ultimately more fulfilling than what had been lost. Life continued its imperfect unfolding. Madison and I discussed potential future together while maintaining healthy independence. My career advanced through balanced commitment rather than exhausting overwork. Relationships with family, including tentative ones with Dominic, evolved through honest communication rather than obligation or competition. The betrayal that once threatened to define me had instead become the catalyst for a life more consciously constructed and genuinely lived than would have been possible without that painful awakening. Not a happy ending, perhaps, but something more authentic, a continuing story of resilience, growth, and the remarkable human capacity to create meaning from even our most painful experiences. If you've ever experienced betrayal or had to rebuild your life after a devastating loss, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. What helped you move forward? What was the most challenging part of your journey? Your experiences might help someone else who's just beginning their path to healing. Please like this video if you found value in my story, subscribe for more real-life experiences, and share with someone who might need to hear that there is life after betrayal. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes what feels like an ending is actually the beginning of something more authentic and meaningful than you could have imagined.